Today's podcast is about a convoluted missing persons case involving two people. It was one of those vanish into thin air cases. However, as the years went by, the count of people who would mysteriously go missing would actually grow. Let's talk about Stephen Lombard and Paul Armstrong. Stephen Lombard, age 33, left his home on Friday, December 17, 1993, telling his wife that he was going to pick up his paycheck at work and then meet up with his wife later to do some Christmas shopping. When Lombard didn't make the meeting, his wife was understandably concerned. By the end of the day, and still not hearing from her husband, she would officially report him missing. On that same day, 28-year-old Paul Armstrong was last seen by his fiancée, Colleen Connor, at 7:45 a.m. when she left for work. An hour later, Armstrong's brother Raymond stopped by the house to check on Paul, but found it empty, although Armstrong's wallet was still there. Armstrong also failed to meet his fiancée for lunch at noon that day. He had broken his leg recently during a tow and was currently off work. He was wearing a brace and had to use crutches. He didn't have much mobility, so that made it even more strange that he was gone. He was also reported missing. It is strange enough that two men who live not far from each other would go missing on the same day, but it gets even more strange. Stephen Lombard and Paul Armstrong were actually co-workers at RTS Towing in Merced, California. However, they weren't really friends, just acquaintances, and they didn't socialize together. Is it just a coincidence that co-workers would go missing on the same day, within 2 hours of each other? Police began their investigation, and the day after he disappeared, Stephen Lombard's 1965 maroon and white Ford F-250 pickup truck was soon found at a nearby Kmart parking lot. There was a full cup of coffee in the console, and the truck was unlocked with the windows rolled down. The truck was equipped with valuable mag wheels and fog lights, but was left unlocked. This was highly unusual, as it was said that he took very good care of his truck. Authorities learned that Lombard was last seen leaving RTS Towing, although they would find out that he was not able to pick up his check due to a clerical error. Police would speak with a friend of Stephen Lombard's who had coffee with him the morning that he disappeared, and he said that his friend had acted normal. As the years went on, police didn't seem to have much to work with. It seemed that most of the tips were phoned in by anonymous callers, so it was difficult to ascertain whether they were credible or not. They followed up any leads they were given, but they didn't have much to work with. The family expressed frustration with the police, but the authorities couldn't let them know all that they had learned, if anything, during their investigation. The Armstrong family hired P.I. Cindy Garretson, and she worked on the disappearance for 4 years. In a newspaper article on the 15th anniversary of the disappearance, police said they had no leads. But in 2009, all of that would change. On February 9, 2009, Karen Wright drove from Merced to her Mexican vacation home in San Felipe to settle some matters with her estranged husband, Randall Wright. 3 days later, Randall Wright called the Merced police to report a possible burglary at his home. When deputies arrived, he also mentioned his wife's disappearance 3 days prior in Mexico. The Merced Police Department then started an investigation. Wright never bothered to report his wife missing in Mexico, the country where she actually went missing from. Authorities there didn't know about it until Merced police traveled there to further investigate the disappearance. Randall Wright claimed that he had spoken with his attorney about his wife going missing and assumed that he would report the disappearance when enough time had gone by. It turns out that mentioning his wife was missing to the authorities would bring some unexpected trouble for him. As police were investigating Karen Wright's disappearance, they also looked into her husband's recent activity. Because of that, on March 18, 2009, Randall Wright was arrested and held on $1 million bail after making a false report about a stolen car and perjury. Police reports that Wright called the California Highway Patrol in February, right after he returned from Mexico, and reported that his Ford Explorer sports track had been stolen. He signed a sworn affidavit to that fact. The vehicle was later found in Butte County in a storage shed, but they believe that Wright already knew of the car's location and committed perjury when he said that he didn't. Police also said that Randall Wright had been driving a $106,000 black Mercedes-Benz G55 that he leased off a dealership. Wright had stopped making payments on the cars months earlier, so he had to turn it in. The car would later come up missing, but was eventually found in San Felipe, Mexico in April 2009 at the condo of a property managed by Wright's then-girlfriend, Teresa Hutt. They subsequently arrested Hutt and charged her with conspiracy to commit theft. U.S. authorities wanted to extradite her, but it was discovered that she was a Canadian citizen, so because of extradition laws, they had to free her at the border. They did say there would be a warrant for her arrest waiting for her if she ever tried to come to the U.S. I found an article in the Merced Sun-Star newspaper from 1978 that I wanted to share. Although many years earlier, this caught my interest because of the false report of theft that Wright made in 2009. In 1978, Randall Wright claimed that someone used a knife to pry a lock off of a garage door. He said that they took a stereo, 4 speakers, television, scanner, weed eater, toolbox, and a pair of sofa cushions from his garage valued at a whopping $1,396. In 1978, remember, so that would be the equivalent of almost $7,000 today. I can't say that it didn't happen, but given the odd items reportedly taken and the large amount it was estimated to be worth, it made me wonder if that was a false claim for insurance as well. Now, you may wonder what Karen Wright going missing in Mexico in 2009 has to do with Stephen Lombard and Paul Armstrong disappearing in 1993. The connection is Randall Wright. Wright was Karen Wright's estranged husband, of course, but he was also the owner of RTS Towing, the company that both missing men worked for. So now 3 people have gone missing that were all connected to Randall Wright. But is that just a coincidence? During the investigation, it was revealed that 5 months prior to her disappearance, in October of 2008, Karen Wright filed to end her 12-year marriage. She claimed in court documents that her husband had physically abused her and threatened her, saying that he could kill her and nobody would know. Randall Wright would counter the accusations, saying that his wife physically abused him and said that she was delusional and thought that he was trying to poison her. By September of 2009, authorities would classify Karen Wright's disappearance as a homicide and say that Randall Wright is their only person of interest, but stopped short of naming him a suspect. Sadly, there would be no activity on her disappearance, and she is still missing to this day. Randall Wright would plead no contest in August of 2009 to felony charges of embezzlement and taking a car without consent. He was to be sentenced in February of 2010, but he claimed that he didn't understand the plea and was impaired by prescription pain pills, so sought to have his no contest plea thrown out. The judge threw out the motion to change the plea. He was to report to the Merced County Jail in early June of 2010 to serve a 6-month jail sentence, but his lawyer filed a last-minute appeal with the Court of Appeals in Fresno, so the sentence was stayed temporarily. However, I could find no mention anywhere of the appeals court decision, so it is unknown whether he eventually ever had to serve his 6-month sentence. While waiting on the appeals court ruling, Randall Wright filed a $15 million lawsuit against the Merced County Sheriff's Department, claiming that he was falsely arrested, and that caused the American Auto Association to end their contract with him, which in turn then caused him to close RTS Towing and eventually declare bankruptcy. The judge would dismiss the lawsuit, saying that there had been probable cause to arrest him. With now 3 disappearances all having links to Randall Wright, police were looking at another incident in his past with a different view. In 1982, Randall Wright's 6-year-old stepson, Aaron David Larson Wright, drowned while playing alone in a pool at the home of Wright's neighbor. It is unclear who was at the boy's house that day in charge of watching him. At the time, the death was thought to be a tragic accident, but given the 3 people connected to Randall Wright going missing, police decided to exhume the little boy's body to see if they could find new clues in the way of scientific advances. Randall Wright said that he was not present when his stepson drowned and had no involvement in his death. It doesn't appear that any additional information was discovered with the exhumation, so the boy's death would remain listed as accidental. In addition to the exhumation of Aaron Wright, a search warrant for Wright's DNA was made public, and it gave a chilling account of what a witness claims to have seen on December 17, 1993, the day of the double disappearance. Jack Malone said that he saw Gary Barker, Stephen Lombard, Paul Armstrong, and Randall Wright go into a shed at RTS Towing. He said that Barker and Wright then came out and locked the door. He never saw Paul Armstrong or Stephen Lombard again. He said that Randall Wright then drove his Lexus into the shop, closed the doors, and drove off in it a little later. He was gone for 4 hours. Meanwhile, Barker drove Armstrong's truck away from the tow yard. Jack Malone said that he believed that Wright was angry with Lombard and Armstrong for filing a complaint with the State Employment Development Department, but it wasn't mentioned what the complaint was in reference to. During the police investigation, it appears that both men had been out of sorts before they disappeared. Louise Lombard, Stephen Lombard's wife, recalled that he seemed scared before he went missing. She said that he told her out of the blue shortly before he disappeared, "I'm not going to leave you. I'll never leave you no matter what." She said he wouldn't say much more than that. Colleen Connor, Paul Armstrong's fiancée, also said that he had been acting peculiar and had been depressed. At the time, she thought it was because of his broken leg, but looking back, she thinks it was something more. It was also reported that shortly before Armstrong disappeared, he had filed a workman's comp claim against RTS Towing. It didn't take long, given the circumstances of their disappearances, for the authorities to believe that the men were missing as a result of foul play. However, there were no concrete clues, and sadly, 32 years later, there is still no trace of the 2 co-workers. As far as my thoughts on the case, I believe that all 3 of them met with foul play the same day that they disappeared. Granted, there is no direct evidence implicating Randall Wright, but I have to use logic to form my opinion. I don't really know who Jack Malone is, but to me his story makes sense. He sees the 2 missing men on the actual morning they go missing at their place of employment under suspicious circumstances, and they coincidentally are never seen again. He also mentioned the 2 men had recently filed a complaint with the local Employment Development Department. I'm curious what the complaint was about. Was there some sort of illegal activity going on there that was about to be revealed? Add to that the fact that Armstrong had also just filed for workman's comp against his business. Both of those facts could certainly have angered Randall Wright. Also, remember that according to the authorities, Stephen Lombard wasn't able to pick up his check due to a clerical error. I'm sure he was at the least annoyed about that, considering he had plans to go Christmas shopping after getting his check that day. Did Randall Wright instruct the office to hold his check for some reason? Or could there have been an altercation between him and Wright about his paycheck that escalated? I really don't see Randall Wright being responsible for his stepson's drowning. There's very little out there, but the newspaper account says that the little boy was swimming alone in the neighbor's pool. If Randall Wright was watching him that day, Perhaps he was neglectful in not watching him well enough, so he was definitely unattended at some point. The few accounts of the tragedy don't give any further details, so from what we know, it appears to be a tragic accident. I do believe that Randall Wright is the most likely suspect for his wife's disappearance. They were estranged with claims of abuse on both sides. It was reported that Karen Wright's reason for traveling to San Felipe was to check up on Randall Wright to make sure he wasn't doing renovations on one of the couple's vacation homes, which would have been violating a court order. For that reason alone indicates there may have been an altercation when the couple met up there. Perhaps he lost control and killed his wife and disposed of her body. He certainly didn't seem concerned at all that she was missing and didn't even bother to report her missing in the town or even country that she disappeared from. Is that because he knew that she wasn't going to be found? It certainly appears that 3 people met with foul play. It is very frustrating that no one has had to pay for the crime. Another tragedy in this case is that the 3 people or their remains have never been found, so their families can at least lay them to rest. There is still hope, of course, that their remains can be found and returned to their loved ones. Only then can there be some kind of closure for this towing travesty. That concludes my podcast on Stephen Lombard and Paul Armstrong. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a rating or review where you listen to your podcast. You can find me on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and YouTube Music under the name Lost and Found Podcast. You can also find all of my original articles and direct links to my most recent podcasts on my website at Lost and Found Blogs. I have social media pages under that name on Facebook, X, and Instagram. You can reach me via email at lostandfoundpodcast@yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.